My entitled brother convinced our dying father to cut me from the will, then got engaged to my ex-fiancé. Yesterday at their wedding, Dad's secret video changed everything. Throwaway for obvious reasons. Also, sorry in advance for the length, but there's a lot to unpack here and I need to get it all out. I, 34F, still can't believe what happened yesterday. My hands are shaking as I type this. I've been lurking on this sub for years, reading everyone else's family drama, never thinking I'd have a story this insane to share myself. But here we are. To understand yesterday's events, you need the whole backstory. My brother Jake, 32M, has always been the golden child of our family. Always. Since we were kids, he could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, especially our father's. Jake was athletic, outgoing, and charming in public, but behind closed doors? Complete narcissist. I'm talking textbook. Our childhood was basically the Jake show. When I got straight A's, Dad would say that's expected. When Jake got a C+, there was a celebration dinner because he tried so hard. When I won state and debate team, a pat on the back. When Jake's football team made it to regionals, he was benched most season. Dad bought him a car. That kind of thing. Our mom passed when I was 17 and Jake was 15, which only made the favoritism worse. Dad basically let Jake do whatever he wanted through his teen years because he needed freedom to process his grief. Meanwhile, I was expected to step up, help around the house, and basically become the responsible one. I cooked, I cleaned, I made sure Jake got to his games, all while maintaining a 4.0 GPA to get a scholarship. Jake partied, crashed cars, and failed classes, but somehow I was the disappointment for not being fun enough. Despite everything, I worked my ass off. Got a scholarship to college, earned my degree in architecture, and built a successful career designing eco-friendly homes. I even fell in love with an amazing guy named Chris. We got engaged 3 years ago, and everything was finally coming together for me. Around this time, Dad was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It was devastating. Despite our complicated relationship, I immediately stepped up to help with his care. I rearranged my work schedule, took him to chemo appointments, and spent nights at the hospital. Jake? He'd show up occasionally, usually when other family was around, play the devoted son for an hour, then leave. But somehow Dad still looked at him like he hung the moon. Chris was incredibly supportive during this time. He had his own architectural firm and even offered me a partnership position so I could have more flexible hours to care for Dad. He and my father got along great too. Dad would often tell me, "You finally did something right, finding a man like Chris." As Dad's condition worsened, he decided to put his affairs in order. Our family home, a beautiful craftsman on 3 acres that had been in the family for generations, was his most valuable asset. Dad had always told us growing up that the house would be shared equally between Jake and me. It meant everything to me. I'd even drawn up renovation plans to preserve its historical elements while making it more sustainable. About 6 months into Dad's illness, Jake suddenly became more involved in his care. At first, I was relieved, finally some help. But I noticed he was spending a lot of time alone with Dad, with the door closed. When I'd enter, they'd stop talking. Red flag, right? But I was so exhausted from caretaking that I didn't push it. One night, I overheard them discussing the will. Jake was saying something like, "She's going to be fine with Chris. They don't need the house. But this is my heritage, Dad. My birthright is your son." I confronted them, and Dad just waved it off, saying they were discussing possibilities and I was being dramatic as usual. 2 weeks later, Chris broke off our engagement. Out of nowhere. Said he needed space and wasn't ready for marriage. I was completely blindsided and heartbroken. When I called Jake crying, he seemed distracted and said he was too busy to talk. Dad, who was having a relatively good day health-wise, just said, "Men need their freedom. You probably pushed too hard." A month later, Dad passed away. At the funeral, Jake was the grieving son, giving a tearful eulogy about how much Dad had taught him about family legacy. I was too numb to even notice how pointed that phrase was. Then came the will reading. That's when the bomb dropped. Dad had changed his will 2 months before his death. The new will left the entire house and 80% of his assets to Jake. I received only some jewelry of my mother's and a small cash bequest that wouldn't even cover 6 months' rent. The lawyer, an old fishing buddy of Dad's, just shrugged when I questioned it, saying, "Your father was of sound mind when he made these changes." I was devastated. Not just for the financial loss, but because it felt like one final confirmation that my father had never valued me the same way he valued Jake. When I confronted Jake, his mask finally dropped. Dad knew I would preserve the family name. "You? You're just going to get married and become someone else. The house should stay with a real Thompson. His smirk as he said it haunts me still. I had to move into a tiny apartment and throw myself into work just to make ends meet. Meanwhile, Jake moved into our family home but didn't maintain it at all. He threw parties, let his friends trash the place, and ignored the leaking roof that was damaging the original woodwork. It was torture watching him neglect something I cherished. 3 months after the funeral came the twist no one saw coming. Jake announced he was in a relationship. With Chris. My ex-fiancé. Apparently, they'd been secretly seeing each other for months before Chris broke things off with me. The timeline meant their affair started while I was taking care of our dying father. The family was shocked, but not exactly supportive of me either. My aunt, Dad's sister, actually said, "Well, these things happen. At least the house stays connected to the family this way." I wanted to scream. Jake and Chris moved into my family home together. They painted the vintage wood paneling white, a crime against architecture, ripped out the heirloom rose garden for a hot tub, and converted my childhood bedroom into a cigar lounge. Every change was a deliberate erasure of our family history and my memories. I tried to move on with my life. I dated a bit, got a promotion at work, and even started therapy to deal with all this trauma. But every family gathering was awkward torture, with Jake and Chris playing the happy couple while I sat alone at the end of the table. Jake would make little digs like, "Chris finally has someone who understands what he needs," or "It's so nice having a partner who puts me first." Each one a deliberate twist of the knife. Fast forward to 7 months ago. Jake and Chris announced their engagement at Thanksgiving dinner, hosted at my family home, of course. The wedding was set for June, exactly when Chris and I had planned to get married. The coincidence was too perfect to be accidental. I considered not attending, but my remaining family members guilted me. "You need to show you've moved on," my cousin said. "It would look bitter if you skipped your only brother's wedding," added my aunt. So I RSVP'd yes, hating myself for being so spineless. Last week was the rehearsal dinner. Jake gave a speech about how he and Chris were meant to be and how grateful he was to Dad for bringing them together before he passed. I nearly threw my wine in his face. As I was leaving, our elderly neighbor Mrs. Peterson, who had been like a second mother to us growing up, grabbed my arm. "Your father left something for you," she whispered. "He made me promise not to give it to you until after Jake was settled in the house. Come by tomorrow." The next day, Mrs. Peterson handed me a small box containing a USB drive and a handwritten note from my father. The note read, "Emma, if you're reading this, I've passed and things haven't gone as I explained to Jake they should. I was weak at the end, but not stupid. Watch this, then go to Davis & Goldman Law Firm. Ask for Richard. Dad." I went home and plugged in the drive. It contained a video of my father, clearly recorded in his final weeks. He looked gaunt but his eyes were clear. What he said left me speechless. "Emma, if you're watching this, it means Jake hasn't honored our agreement. I changed my will to leave him everything because he threatened to cut me off completely in my final months if I didn't. He knew my greatest fear was dying alone. But I made him promise that after my death, he would split everything with you 50-50 as was always the plan. The house was meant for both of you. I was a coward not to stand up to him, and I've probably been a coward your whole life. The truth is, you were always the stronger one, the better one, and that scared me because you're so much like your mother. It was easier to focus on Jake because he needed the extra attention. You were always going to be okay no matter what. If Jake has broken his promise, go to Richard Davis. He has a copy of my real will, the one I made before Jake's ultimatum, and evidence of the coercion. I also recorded conversations with Jake where he made his threats. I'm sorry, Emma. I failed you. But I hope this makes things right." I sat there sobbing for hours. Then I called Richard Davis and made an appointment for the next morning, the day of Jake and Chris's wedding. Richard confirmed everything. My father had documented Jake's coercion and left extensive evidence. The original will split everything 50-50 between us, with a clause that the house couldn't be sold without mutual agreement. Richard had already prepared legal documents to contest the fraudulent will. All he needed was my signature. I had a choice to make. I could sign the papers and set the legal process in motion, which would eventually get me justice but would take months of ugly court battles. Or I could do something more immediate. I chose the latter. I went to the wedding. I sat quietly through the ceremony at the local botanical gardens. I smiled politely during the cocktail hour. I waited until the reception when Jake and Chris were about to make their big entrance as a married couple. The DJ asked everyone to turn their attention to the screen for a special video message before the couple entered. That's when I connected my laptop to the projector and played my father's video. The room went completely silent as my father's thin, dying face appeared on screen and he detailed exactly how Jake had emotionally blackmailed him and broken his promise. You could have heard a pin drop when Dad called Jake a manipulative, selfish boy who never became a man and apologized to me for his weakness. When the video ended with Dad saying he had left legal evidence of the coercion, I simply stood up. Congratulations on your wedding, Jake and Chris. Your gift from me is the truth. Oh, and you'll both be receiving legal notices tomorrow. Enjoy your honeymoon. I walked out to absolute chaos behind me. Jake was screaming that the video was fake. Chris looked shell-shocked. Family members were either gasping or shouting questions. Jake's new in-laws were demanding explanations. It was glorious. That was yesterday. Today, my phone has been blowing up. Jake left me 37 increasingly desperate voicemails, starting with threats and ending with tearful pleas. Chris texted a long apology claiming he never knew about Jake's manipulation of Dad, though he conveniently doesn't deny the affair. Family members are divided, some apologizing profusely for doubting me, others claiming I ruined Jake's special day and should have handled it privately. I haven't responded to anyone. Instead, I met with Richard again this morning and formally filed to contest the will. Richard says with Dad's video evidence, it's almost a guaranteed win. The house will be mine within months. The strangest feeling? Relief. Not just about getting my inheritance back, but about finally knowing my father didn't dismiss me completely at the end. He was weak and flawed, but he tried to make it right. So that's where I am now. Sitting in my tiny apartment, drinking champagne straight from the bottle, and finally feeling like justice is on the horizon. I don't know if I'll ever forgive Jake, or Chris, or even my father completely. But for the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe again. Update, 3 months later. First, thank you for all the support on my original post. Your comments helped me stay strong through what came next. The legal process went exactly as Richard predicted. With Dad's video evidence, Jake had no defense. The judge invalidated the coerced will and reinstated the original one. As of last month, I officially own 50% of the house and received my proper share of Dad's other assets. Jake and Chris were ordered to vacate the property within 30 days. Jake's marriage didn't survive this. Chris filed for divorce just 2 weeks after the wedding, claiming Jake had misrepresented his financial situation and demonstrated character issues that made the marriage untenable. Translation: Chris realized he'd hitched his wagon to the wrong horse once Jake wasn't wealthy anymore. Karma at its finest. I've decided to buy out Jake's share of the house. Richard helped negotiate a price well below market value, considering the legal fees Jake was facing. He accepted quickly. Apparently, he's moving to Florida to start fresh. I got a drunk text from him last week saying he never meant for things to go this far and that he was sorry. Too little, too late, but at least it's something. As for me, I'm moving back into the family home next week. My first project is restoring Mom's rose garden. I've also reconnected with Mrs. Peterson, who's been sharing old family stories I never knew. Turns out Dad kept journals for years, and she had been keeping them safe. Reading them has been enlightening. He was a more complex man than I realized, and in his own way, he did love me. It doesn't erase the past, but it helps. Oh, and I'm dating again, a structural engineer I met through work. He helps me see the humor in this whole crazy situation, and he's already offering design ideas for the house restoration. We're taking it slow, but it feels good to trust someone again. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine now. On my own terms. And that's enough. Story 2. My sister sabotaged my wedding, convinced my husband to give her control of our family business, then destroyed my marriage. Now she's homeless and begging me for help. Throwaway for obvious reasons. I never thought I'd be posting here, but I need to get this off my chest, and my therapist thinks writing it all down might help me process everything. This is going to be long, so buckle up. I'm still in shock over how my life has completely imploded and somehow rebuilt itself over the past 2 years. I, 34F, have always had a complicated relationship with my younger sister Amy, 31F. Growing up, she was the golden child, pretty, outgoing, charming, and manipulative as hell. Our parents never saw it though. They just saw their perfect little princess while I was the difficult one, aka the one who called Amy out on her BS and refused to let her walk all over me. Some quick background: I met my, now ex-husband James when we were in college. He was studying business and had big dreams of expanding his family's construction company. I fell hard for him. He was smart, ambitious, and treated me like I mattered. We dated for 5 years before getting married. During those years, Amy was always oddly interested in my relationship, asking tons of questions about James's family business, wanting to hang out with us, and even accidentally bumping into us on dates. I should have seen the warning signs, but I was too naive and thought she was just being supportive. Our wedding was where things first went visibly off the rails. Amy was my maid of honor, family pressure, I wanted my best friend Tina, but my mom insisted it had to be Amy. The night before the wedding, Amy took me and the bridesmaids out for drinks. She kept pushing shots on me despite knowing I rarely drink. I ended up violently ill all night and looked like absolute hell on my wedding day. I later found out from Tina that Amy had been putting extra shots in my drinks when I wasn't looking. The wedding itself was a disaster. I was barely able to stand during the ceremony. During her most speech, Amy told embarrassing stories about me that weren't even true, including one about how I'd always been jealous of her relationship with James. They had no relationship at that point. James looked confused, my family looked uncomfortable, and I was too sick to even defend myself. We have exactly 3 good photos from our wedding day, and in all the rest, I look like I'm about to pass out, which I eventually did, missing half of my own reception. James was understanding and we moved past it. We bought a house near his parents' place since he was taking on more responsibility in the family construction business. Things were good for a while. I got a job as a marketing director for a local company, and James was being groomed to take over the business from his dad who was planning to retire. About a year after our wedding, Amy moved to our city for a job opportunity. She immediately started inserting herself into our lives. Showing up unannounced for dinner. Calling James directly instead of me. Somehow always managing to be around when his parents came over. At first, I thought she was just being annoying Amy, but it was so much more calculated than that. She started making comments about how I never seemed interested in James's business when he talked about work. How I didn't understand the construction industry. How she'd always been fascinated by it. Small undermining comments that seemed innocent but added up over time. James started inviting her to family business events because she asked such good questions. I raised concerns but was told I was being petty and jealous of my own sister. Then Amy got hired at the company. Not in some entry-level position, mind you. Somehow, despite having zero relevant experience, she was hired as the business development manager, a position that hadn't existed before. James's dad took an immediate liking to her. She reminds me of myself when I was younger, he'd say. Such a go-getter. Meanwhile, I'd known this man for 9 years and he still called me Janet sometimes. My name is Jessica. Over the next year, Amy became increasingly embedded in the company. She'd work late with James. They'd have business dinners I wasn't invited to because you'd be bored, Jess. She'd text him at all hours about urgent work matters. When I expressed discomfort with their relationship, both James and Amy made me feel crazy. She's your sister, he'd say, completely missing the point. You should be happy we get along so well. During this time, my father-in-law's health took a turn. He had a minor heart attack, and suddenly retirement wasn't just a future plan but an immediate necessity. Everyone expected James to step up as president, he'd been working toward this for years. But at the family meeting where the transition was to be announced, my father-in-law dropped a bomb: James and Amy would be co-presidents. I nearly fell out of my chair. James looked shocked but didn't object. Amy had the audacity to fake surprise, all while wearing the smug little smile I'd known since childhood, the one that said I got what I wanted and you can't do anything about it. Amy has brought so many fresh ideas to the company, my father-in-law explained. She's increased our contracts by 30% in just a year. And she understands the business like she was born into it. No one seemed to find it strange that Amy, with barely a year of experience, was now equal to James who had literally grown up in this business. No one but me. Things deteriorated rapidly after that. James was working 70-hour weeks. Amy was too busy to join us for family events but somehow had time to accompany James to business conferences across the country. I found receipts for dinners with $200 bottles of wine, hotel room upgrades, and even weekend extensions on business trips. When I confronted James, he said it was all business and that Amy was helping them land major contracts that were saving the company. I didn't find out until much later that the company had been in financial trouble before Amy arrived. My father-in-law had made some poor investments, and they were at risk of losing everything. Amy had swooped in with connections to wealthy clients, which I later discovered came through some ethically questionable channels, and positioned herself as the savior of the family business. The breaking point came when I found text messages between them. Nothing overtly romantic, but familiar in a way that made my stomach turn. Inside jokes. Late-night conversations. Plans made without me. And worse, critical comments about me. James complained that I didn't understand the pressure he was under and Amy commiserated, saying she wished I was more supportive and that some people just don't have that business mindset. When I confronted James, he didn't even try to deny it. Instead, He told me I was being childish and needed to grow up and understand how the real world works. He said Amy was essential to the business now and I needed to accept that she was part of our lives. I suggested marriage counseling. He said he didn't have time. I asked to be more involved in the business so I could understand his world better. He said I wouldn't get it. I finally issued an ultimatum: either Amy steps back from her role in his life, or I was leaving. He chose Amy. Or rather, he chose the business with Amy in it. The divorce was ugly. Since Amy was now embedded in the family business, she had James's parents convinced that I was the villain, the unsupportive wife who couldn't handle her husband's success. They treated me like I was crazy for seeing problems in James and Amy's relationship. His mother actually said to me, "Amy has been nothing but supportive of your marriage. If anyone's coming between you, it's your own jealousy." I lost my in-laws who I'd loved for nearly a decade. I lost mutual friends who believed James's version of events. I even lost the support of my own parents initially, who thought I was throwing away a good marriage over nothing. Amy had gotten to them too, crying about how she was just trying to help and now I was blaming her for my marital problems. I had to move out of our house since it was too closely tied to the family business finances. I found a small apartment and tried to rebuild my life. I threw myself into my marketing job and thankfully had a supportive boss who gave me challenging projects to keep my mind occupied. The only person who stood by me 100% was Tina, who had witnessed Amy's manipulation since we were kids. "She's finally gotten everything she ever wanted," Tina said. "Your husband, your family's support, the business connection." Classic Amy. I was at rock bottom. Divorced at 33, living in a crappy apartment, doubting myself constantly. Had I overreacted? Was I really the jealous, unsupportive wife everyone now thought I was? But then, about 8 months after our divorce was finalized, something unexpected happened. I got a call from James's cousin Michael, who worked in the company's accounting department. We'd always gotten along well, and he was one of the few people who had stayed neutral during the divorce. "Jessica, there's something you should know," he said. "I'm risking my job telling you this, but after how they treated you, I think you deserve to know the truth." Michael explained that Amy had been manipulating the company's finances. She'd been landing big contracts, yes, but at unsustainable rates that were actually losing them money long term. She'd also been reallocating company funds for personal expenses, trips, clothing, even a down payment on a luxury condo, all disguised as business expenses. Worst of all, she'd taken out loans against company assets without proper authorization. "The company is headed for bankruptcy, and she's been cooking the books to hide it," Michael said. "James is finally starting to see it, but it might be too late. His parents are devastated. They might lose everything, including their retirement funds." I felt sick. Not happy, not vindicated, just sick. Despite everything, I still cared about James's parents. They'd been manipulated by Amy just like everyone else. I asked Michael why he was telling me this. "Because you tried to warn everyone about her, and no one listened," he said. "And because I need your help." Michael had been gathering evidence of Amy's financial misconduct for months. He had documented everything but wasn't sure how to proceed without destroying the company in the process. Since I was no longer legally connected to the business, I could help without a conflict of interest. I connected Michael with a lawyer friend who specialized in financial fraud cases. Together, they built a case against Amy while creating a plan to save the company from complete collapse. It was tricky. They needed to remove Amy without triggering a public scandal that would sink the already struggling business. Over the next 2 months, I stayed in the background while Michael and the lawyer worked with James to understand the full extent of the damage Amy had done. James was initially resistant, still believing in Amy, but the evidence was overwhelming. Company funds in her personal accounts. Forged signatures. Falsified reports. Client complaints that had been hidden from him. The confrontation happened during an emergency board meeting. Amy was presented with the evidence and given a choice: resign immediately, return the misappropriated funds, and face no criminal charges, or go to jail. She broke down, not with remorse but with rage. She screamed that she'd saved this pathetic company and that none of them appreciated her sacrifices. She called James weak and his parents foolish. The mask had finally slipped completely. I wasn't there, but Michael recorded it, legally, with the lawyer's guidance. Hearing Amy's true nature exposed to the people who had chosen her over me was both heartbreaking and vindicating. Amy resigned and agreed to return what funds she hadn't already spent. She disappeared almost immediately, apparently heading west to stay with a cousin. The company was in shambles but salvageable. James and his parents were humiliated but grateful that the situation had been handled privately. A few weeks later, James called me. It was the first time we'd spoken directly since the divorce. He asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, more out of curiosity than anything else. At the coffee shop, James looked terrible, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and new gray hairs at his temples. He apologized for not believing me about Amy. For choosing the business over our marriage. For letting her come between us. "You were right about her all along," he said. "I was so blind. We all were. She nearly destroyed everything my family spent generations building." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. "My parents wanted me to ask if you'd consider coming back," he continued. "To me. To the family. They miss you. I miss you. We could start over." Part of me, a small, wounded part, wanted to scream at him. To remind him how thoroughly he'd betrayed and gaslit me. How he'd stood by while his family and my own turned against me. How he'd chosen Amy over 10 years of love and partnership. Instead, I just said, "No, James. That's not possible." His face fell, but he nodded. "I understand. I just had to try." We talked a bit more. He told me they were slowly rebuilding the company. That his parents had officially retired, leaving him solely in charge. That they'd learned an expensive lesson about trusting too easily. As we were about to leave, I asked the question that had been bothering me: "Did anything ever happen between you and Amy? Anything inappropriate?" James looked genuinely shocked. "No. God, no. She's your sister. I would never." He paused. "She did try, though. Once. After you left. She said that since we were both single now, there was no reason we couldn't be together. That's when I finally started to see who she really was." I believe him. Not because I trust James anymore, but because that fits Amy's pattern perfectly. She never really wanted James, she wanted what I had. Once I was gone, the thrill was gone too. My life has changed dramatically since then. The experience with Michael and the lawyer showed me I had a knack for crisis management. I left my marketing job and started my own small consulting firm focusing on helping family businesses navigate transitions and conflicts. I'm dating again, nothing serious, but it's nice to remember I'm not defined by what happened with James and Amy. I've rebuilt relationships with my parents, who finally saw Amy clearly after she tried to borrow money from them for a business opportunity that turned out to be completely fabricated. They've apologized profusely for not believing me. And that brings me to last week. I was leaving my office when I saw a familiar figure sitting on a bench outside my building. It was Amy. She looked terrible, thin, unkempt, nothing like the polished businesswoman who had stolen my life. When she saw me, she burst into tears and begged for a chance to talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed to hear her out over coffee, in a public place, because I'm not stupid. Through tears and self-pity, Amy told me she'd lost everything. The money she'd taken had run out quickly. Her reputation was ruined in our industry. She'd been evicted from her apartment and was staying in her car. None of her friends would help her. Our parents had refused to take her in after discovering more of her lies. "You're the only one left," she sobbed. "I know I don't deserve your help, but you've always been the better person. The kinder sister. Please, Jess. I just need a place to stay for a few weeks until I figure things out." I stared at my sister, this person who had methodically destroyed my marriage, alienated me from my family, and nearly ruined a generations-old business out of pure selfishness and jealousy. And I started to laugh. I laughed so hard tears came to my eyes. Amy looked shocked, then angry. "What's so funny about my situation?" she demanded. When I could finally speak, I said, "You know what's funny, Amy? You spent your entire life trying to take what was mine. And now that you've lost everything, I'm suddenly the better person? The kinder sister? Now you want to acknowledge that?" "I made mistakes," she said. "I'm sorry." "No, you're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught and that your actions finally have consequences." I stood up to leave. "I'm not going to help you, Amy. Not because I can't forgive you, but because you need to experience the results of your choices. That's the only way you might actually change." Her face twisted with anger. "You've always been so self-righteous. After everything I've been through." "Everything you've been through?" I cut her off. "Everything you've been through is the direct result of what you did to me and James's family. This isn't bad luck or misfortune. This is consequence." I left her sitting there, fuming. As I walked away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, not because I'd refused to help her, but because I finally, completely stopped caring what Amy thought of me. I know some might think I'm heartless for not helping my homeless sister. Maybe I am. But some relationships are too toxic to salvage, and some people never change as long as others keep rescuing them from their own messes. So that's my story. My sister tried to steal my life, succeeded for a while, then lost everything. And I've finally found my freedom from the dynamic that controlled us since childhood. If you've read this far, thanks for listening to my novel-length drama. Sometimes I still can't believe this is my real life. Update. It's been about 6 months since my confrontation with Amy at the coffee shop, and wow, a lot has changed. I didn't expect this post to get so much attention, RIP my inbox. Since so many people asked for an update, here it is. Amy didn't give up easily after I refused to help her. She showed up at my apartment twice, once drunk and screaming in the hallway until neighbors called security. She also tried to contact several of my clients, telling them twisted stories about me. Fortunately, my reputation was solid enough that it only backfired on her. I finally had to get a restraining order, which was a surreal experience, filing legal paperwork to keep my own sister away from me. The judge granted it after seeing evidence of her harassment and history of manipulation. The unexpected twist: about 2 months after getting the restraining order, I received a call from a rehabilitation center 2 states away. Amy had checked herself in for treatment. According to her counselor, who had her permission to contact me, she'd hit rock bottom sleeping in her car and had a moment of clarity. The counselor asked if I'd be willing to participate in family therapy as part of her recovery. I declined but sent a letter wishing her well in her recovery journey. I'm not ready to have her in my life again, and may never be, but I genuinely hope she gets the help she needs. On a brighter note, my consulting business is thriving. I've even hired 2 employees and moved to a better office. There's something poetically just about building my success on helping family businesses avoid the exact kind of manipulation that Amy specialized in. James's family business survived and is slowly recovering. His parents reached out directly to apologize, and we've had dinner twice. There's no bad blood there anymore, just sadness over what might have been. James himself is dating someone new, and I'm genuinely happy for him. We'll never be close again, but we've reached a place of civil respect. As for me, I've been seeing someone for about 3 months now. It's going well, he's kind, straightforward, and has zero drama in his life, which is exactly what I need. He knows my whole story and says I should write a book someday. Maybe I will. Life is strangely good now. Better than before, in many ways. I've learned who I can truly count on, what I'm capable of surviving, and how to stand firmly in my own worth. Thanks again for all the supportive comments. It really helped to know I wasn't crazy for setting boundaries, even with family. Especially with family.